When you're a kid, you're always working to define the parameters of your world, of what is possible, charting your existence based upon the tangible facts of your surroundings. The adolescent mind is malleable, though, and is consistently experiencing things that expand its worldview. One thing I felt I had a pretty good handle on as a kid in the mid-1990s was what video games were. Side-scrollers giving way to 3D action games, shooters, fighting games, sports titles. But in 1997, they started advertising a game called Parappa the Rapper. It seemed to be a game that told a story, but there was no combat, no fighting. The action seemed to be rapping? Could that be possible? I didn't have a PlayStation, so I didn't get any confirmation either way at the time. But as the era of the Sega Dreamcast, another console I didn't have, marched into the summer of the year 2000, another game like that appeared on the scene to capture my imagination. A game starring a cool-looking woman dressed in retro futurist clothing called Space Channel 5. Space Channel 5 was different from Parappa the Rapper in the sense that you're not doing any rapping, but they both fall generally under the purview of the rhythm game. Outside of a quirky release for the NES called Dance Aerobics in 1987, that was designed for a short-lived floor mat controller peripheral called the Power Pad, Parappa was sort of the vanguard for the rhythm genre, where you followed along as the game gave you input prompts matched to the beat. Other series of rhythmic music games began to emerge in Parappa's wake. Beatmania, Poppin' Music, and most enduringly, Dance Dance Revolution, which had arcade players perform the actions with their feet, pressing the buttons as a physical commitment. Around the same time, prominent game developer Tetsuya Mizuguchi, then mostly famous for the Sega Rally series, which we discussed on its own episode, received an edict to create a game intended for casual female gamers. His research said that the female gamers he surveyed were interested more in puzzle solving and aesthetic discovery than in high-score achievement or competitive dominance. And his team set out to make a fresh game with that in mind. As his game went into production, he consciously decided to go away from the structure of those rhythm games, which mostly featured players hitting directional buttons in front of what was essentially an unrelated stylistic background. He wanted his game to be more interactive, and developed a structure winding in the rhythmic elements as both narrative elements, telling a story, and gameplay elements, like a virtual round of Simon Says. Space Channel 5 puts players in the platform boots of a woman named Ulala, a reporter for the titular channel in a swingin' future. An alien race called the Merolians has begun attacking, infecting people with, I guess, dance fever.
Hey there, Space Cats! Ulala here, coming at you from Spaceport 9. Tonight I'm investigating reports that aliens have invaded and are forcing people to dance.
Your job is to fight off the threat, both from the aliens and from rival reporters trying to get your goddamn scoops.
Hey, who the heck is that?
Good evening, everyone. I am Pudding.
Is that another reporter?
Watch my report on Channel 42.
Take her out!
As you attempt to discover who or what is behind things. Space Channel 5's main appeal is its structure, its imagination, its sense of style. The game is bathed wall to wall in this cool, retro-futuristic aesthetic. Very Pan Am, cutesy Barbarella. Even more essential to its charm is its soundtrack, built around the song Mexican Flyer by 1960s British trumpeter Ken Woodman. I honestly can't seem to figure out where the game's creators found this relatively obscure song, but its use here is instantly iconic. and the game takes so many cues from that attractive tone. Everything about its presentation is big and brassy and sassy and cute and fun. Ulala is animated very fluidly in the cutscenes, and the decisiveness of her movements is very appealing. There was some controversy in Japan over who actually voiced Ulala. At game's end, she is simply credited as herself. But in America, she's voiced by a singer-slash-dancer named Apollo Smile, who gained attention at the time billing herself as the live-action anime girl at anime and game conventions for several years, which led to TV hosting gigs and voice acting work, which led to Space Channel 5. Smile perfectly inhabits Ulala's playful but professional demeanor.
I'm in the dining hall. Something smells delish.
Don't get distracted, Ulala.
Bye.
And the game follows suit. There's so many funny little details. From your headset-bound manager's incredulous response when Space Channel 5 gets scooped on a story by another reporter.
Don't you have to follow them, Channel 5?
Blast you, Jaguar!
To the transitional walking sequences, varying depending on how well you did in the level, strutting proudly to the blare of Woodman's trumpet if you did well, and rhythmically holding their heads in shame with an atonal cringe if you struggled. These vibes are so deliriously charming that it makes up for a whole hell of a lot in this experience, especially when it comes to the way the game plays. Space Channel 5's gameplay is extremely straightforward. The game alternates between sequences where you have to precisely mimic the movements of the aliens or other antagonists, using up, down, left, and right on the D-pad, and sequences where you have to shoot aliens with your ray gun using the A button, while saving kidnapped hostages with the B button. The main complication with this format is that the game's hitbox threshold for button presses is extremely narrow, and my first days with the emulation I had acquired went so drastically poorly, even projected onto my big TV, that it became a major catalyst for me wanting to make sure I purchased the actual discs, to make sure that I wasn't unfairly holding the game responsible for the latency issues of my computer. But guess what? Even on my CRT TV, creating an exact simulacrum of experiencing this game on original hardware in the summer of the year 2000, I was still having basically no luck. My notes are full of things like utterly unclear what timing or rhythm it wants from you. This is so ridiculously unresponsive. The Dreamcast controller is just not built for this level of fluidity. The buttons just won't hit. The game also plays these big, exaggerated boing sound effects when you're told you've missed. And it's just so demoralizing. Another weird little thing is that the game also tells you to follow along and respond when the aliens say chew.
Oh man, there's still more! Use your A-beam if you hear them say chew!
Which I guess sounds like shoot, but also, they don't say chew. Ulala says chew, but the aliens, they say kiss.
Kiss! Here we go! Chew!
This is a minor thing, but in a game that relies so heavily on exact emulation of rhythm, it's just a weird extra step in the brain sometimes. The other big issue is that though there's really only 4 overall levels, those levels are extremely lengthy and provide basically no checkpoint support within them. I did eventually get better at the game generally, but the levels are so long that it feels like it's deliberately designed to artificially prolong play, to expand the time it takes to beat. The game gives you an allotment of hearts in each stage that you have to maintain to get through a level, as well as a general level of quality written as a TV rating that you have to maintain, Think of it like a Rotten Tomatoes score and a Metacritic score. One thing measures pass versus fail, and the other measures how well did you pass. The problem is that making even a single mistake during the runs of Simon Says or ray gun shooting causes the whole string to be considered a failure and costs you a heart. It doesn't matter how you do as a whole, every individual section is its own opportunity to fail. So no matter how good your percentage is, or how well you do in each hearts segment, you can't bank those hearts for later, like a Zelda game. You can't do so well in the first parts that you can make your life easier later. Each section simply is what it is, and especially the very unresponsive final battle is ridiculously strict, giving you only 2 hearts for a segment where you're told to mimic the robot, but do the exact opposite of what he's doing.
Listen, Ulala, this is gonna be a little tricky. Do the opposite of what they say and use your AB.
If they say left, I press right.
And things feeling insanely narrow and unresponsive is really frustrating when you're already trying to keep track of the backward
Down, 2, left, 2, right, 2.
This grows even more frustrating when you consider that this specific unfair section is at the end of a level that is nearly 15 full minutes long, with no checkpoints. There's no way to practice the section that's too hard. You just have to do the entire level over and over and over and over to give yourself another shot and hope this time you get things well enough together to skate by. I would venture to guess that legitimately over 60 or 70% of my total playtime with this game was simply trudging through all the sections of the final level before getting to that last section and failing over and over.
Left, 2, 2, right, 2, 2, down, 2, 2.
The show's being canceled?
I can probably recite to you the entire final level's dialogue from every section verbatim, just because I had to hear it so much. It really made me want to quit playing, and for a while it became something of a nihilistic daily obligation to apportion an hour every evening to give it another few shots. And every day I would come tantalizingly close and then fail.
The show's being canceled?
A few times, I actually did manage to skate by that nefarious section. But the actual final section is also incredibly demanding and incredibly restrictive. And with absolutely no practice, I would inevitably falter and have to do the whole goddamn thing again.
The show's being canceled?
This went on so long that I decided to take matters into my own hands. Since I knew the latency issue was between me and the game, and not between the game and its emulation, I decided to re-download that emulation, speedrun through the entire game up to the final level, and then utilize the ability to save the game at any point, and only work on the part of the game that I couldn't beat. This allowed me to truly practice, while not wasting so much time on the parts of the level that I had fully 100% mastered. And I was able to finally beat the game, with a celebratory ending that probably would have been very satisfying had I actually gotten to it in a reasonable amount of time. But I did do it, and ultimately, I am satisfied. Even with the frustration in the moment, looking back on the experience, I find it hard to be too mad. Because it's so cool and funny, so brassy and catchy, dancey and goofy fun. It remains in my mind because it's so light and so bright, so vivid and colorful, cartoony in ways that feel appealing and iconic. They inhabit so well that 90s era evocation of 60s aesthetics, the synthetic, space-age flower child energy, that it feels like a blanket of luxurious nostalgia, no matter how frustrating it got. It honestly did such a good job of bringing forth that tone that Kieran Kirby, better known as Lady Miss Kier of the band D-Light, whose whole thing, Ulala, seems very reminiscent of, sued Sega for infringement on her likeness. But Sega proved they had the whole concept before she alleged they spoke to her. But Ulala is lithe and sunny and feminine and unflappable in the same bewitching way as D-Light's head chanteuse. The iconography was eye-catching and memorable generally, and Ulala was immediately utilized as one of the Dreamcast's chief mascots. She's all over advertisements for the system. And there were plans to do a news show or a narrative program starring the character. She was seemingly everywhere for a minute there. And even if this was the beginning of the downslope for the Dreamcast console, this game was one I was looking forward to for many moons on this project, just to finally see what it was all about. And if it wasn't perfect, it also was basically what I was expecting it to be. A simple, silly, stupid, kind of broken, very charming little dancing game that, for the most part, I found a joy to come back to, even over better games. The music is so cool, the structure is so clever, thoughtful. I readily picked it over games that I considered better just because it was such a chill little time that, again, for the most part, asked so little of me. I'm always going to be down to give rhythm games the time of day because they feel so low commitment, yet so outside the norm, and they're always so damn quirky and memorable. Oh, I almost forgot. Speaking of quirky and memorable, in level 3, you turn a corner to start a new section, and Ulala simply says, "They've got Space Michael!"
Careful, the security system's been tampered with.
Okay, look, they've got Space Michael.
And, so Michael Jackson's in this game. Like, actually in this game. Like, saw the game being made, requested to be in it, gave his permission to use his likeness, even recorded some voice audio for the game in this game. You just run onto him being menaced by aliens, you save him using the power of dance, and now Space Michael is in your party as you rescue and acquire new pals in your journey to solving this mystery. Jackson has such a funny relationship in video game lore, from the Moonwalker game to secretly writing music for Sonic the Hedgehog 3, and now this. I'm not particularly familiar with what Michael Jackson was up to in 1999, but I certainly didn't expect him to pop up on my Dreamcast project. But Space Channel 5, flawed as it is, has such an idiosyncratic charm that really anything feels possible. And if that doesn't perfectly encapsulate the overall vibe of the Dreamcast as a console, well, I don't know what does. Space Channel 5, over and out. Next time, in a warrior's dream, witness a 0 become an alpha in 3 easy steps. Go for broke, man!